Let's take a minute and dig this graph. And notice it's the graph of f prime of x. So we're looking at the derivative here. Now, looking at the derivative, what can that tell us about the function f? And what can it tell us about f double prime? But let's look at this. So first of all, let's think about just the relationship between f prime, and f double prime. Now, first of all, and let me just make a little table here. When f is increasing, the first derivative is positive. What about when f is decreasing? Well, the first derivative is negative. Now, let's bump that over here and say, okay, well, what about when the first derivative is increasing? Well, the second derivative is positive. If the first derivative is decreasing, the second derivative is negative. Now, here's the thing. Well, what's going on here for the function? Well, if your second derivative is positive, your first derivative is increasing, that means you have concave up. What if your second derivative is negative? Well, that means you have concave down. Now also, notice this. You have a max here for your function. Your function has a max if you go from positive 0 to negative, definitely. You have a min if you go from negative 0 to positive on this graph. Okay, looking at this graph. Now, what would that give us over here? Well, for the second derivative, if you have a max, that means that this is negative. And if you have a min, that means this is positive because you have concave up. So this is how these three are related. But what we're looking at here is we're looking at the first derivative. Now, we want to determine, well, first of all, where is f increasing? That's what we want to know. Where is f increasing? Well, it's increasing wherever the first derivative is positive. Right? Look at that. The first derivative is positive. That's where it's increasing. So let's see where the first derivative is positive. Well, from 0 to x2, okay, so let's put that down here. From 0 to x sub 2. Where else? Oh, over here. From x sub 4 to infinity. See, what we're doing is we're looking at the first derivative, the graph of the first derivative. So it's not saying where is f prime increasing, it's saying where is f increasing. And we want to answer that question by looking at the first derivative. Now, where is f decreasing? Well, it's decreasing whenever the f prime is below the axis. In other words, wherever f prime is negative. Well, that's going to be from negative infinity to 0, see? Union with x2 to x4, see? Yeah, like that. That's where it's decreasing. Now, where does a max occur? Okay, so where does a max occur? Well, a max is going to occur when we go from increasing to decreasing. In other words, when our first derivative is above the axis and then shifts down to below the axis. Well, that's going to happen at x sub 2, right? Notice we're above. First derivative is positive. First derivative is negative. So we go from positive first derivative to a negative first derivative. And I guess that's it, right? Now, where do you have a min? Now, realize that x2 is not the actual max. It's where the max occurs. Now, where does the min occur? Well, when you go from a negative first derivative to a positive first derivative. In other words, your function goes from decreasing to increasing. Well, that's going to occur here at 0. And where else? x4. See? That's when you go from below the axis to above the axis. Yeah, there we have it. Now, let's go back and, okay, well, let's look at the next thing. Now, let's suppose we want to know, where is f concave up? Where is f concave up? Well, f is concave up whenever the first derivative is increasing. See? So whenever the first derivative is increasing, in other words, the second derivative is positive. So whenever the first derivative is increasing, well, that's going to occur at the maxes and mins. In other words, it goes from increasing to decreasing, or where it's concave down is when it goes from decreasing to increasing. But let's answer this. F is concave up. Well, let's see here. From negative infinity to x sub 1. See? That's where the graph is increasing. That's where the function, that's where f prime is increasing. Now, it's also increasing over here from x3 to infinity. See? So, union with x3 to infinity. So, when you're asked, well, where is f concave up? Well, whenever the first derivative is increasing, or the second derivative is positive. They're the same, right? But we're looking at the first derivative, so we say, when the first derivative is increasing, that's when we have concave up. Well, when do you have concave down? So f concave down. Well, that's when the first derivative is decreasing. And the first derivative is decreasing here, right? From x1 to x3. Yeah, right there. Now, what about inflection? Where does inflection occur? Well, inflection is going to occur when you change from increasing to decreasing. In other words, you change concavity. Where does concavity change? Well, concavity is going to change here. The first derivative is increasing, now it's decreasing. So at x1, where else? x3. See, you look for where concavity changes. That's where you go from, that's where you have inflection.